Today's verse of the day, by the way, is famous. For all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God and are justified by his grace as a gift through the redemption that is in Christ Jesus. Okay, so here's the thing. There's a lot of words there, and it's not going to get any better when I hit this button. Okay, so Romans chapter 3. There's a lot happening, okay? So when you enter into Romans, and really when you enter into a lot of the New Testament books, not all of them, letters especially, you're entering into an argument. You're entering into kind of like reading someone's mail from their house, and you're having to figure out, what are they talking about? Who are they talking about? What was the situation that led to the sending of this letter? Why was this happening? What's going on here? And that's what's happening to us. And then more so when you enter into the middle. You grab a verse in the middle of a paragraph, in the middle of a thought, in the middle of an argument, in the middle of a conversation that's happening among letters in cities 2,000 years ago, right? Takes a little bit, but this particular passage is fairly easy to understand. I'll give you a bit of context. In Romans, you have Paul, who is the Apostle Paul. So the Apostle is a man who has been called out by Jesus to be specially equipped and specially authorized to be able to plant churches and to have authority, to carry his authority, to be one of his people, to be able to tell the church what to do. He listens to Jesus. He says to people, this is what Jesus says. Okay, that's what an apostle is. So the Apostle Paul, he's been planting churches all over the place, and he finds out that there's a church in Rome. Now, he knows he's supposed to go to Rome. He knows he's going to end up in Rome. He knows that he's going to stand before, governors and princes. That's kind of his deal. He just hasn't been there yet. But after what they call the diaspora, so after Pentecost, after the 3,000 people get saved in Pentecost, which is 50 days after the Passover, there's this, everybody goes home. And anybody who was converted, anybody who was changed, anybody who became a Christian, they wander off to go back home, whether that be to, far-flung places in Greece or someplace in Turkey or whatever. They go all over the place. And some people landed in Rome. So Rome starts up a church. And Paul learns later, even a few years later, that there has been this church, underground church, thriving in Rome for a while, and he didn't even know about it. He's like, wow, that's cool. I better if anybody needs to get a letter, it's these guys, because they're in like the pinnacle, the area that is going to be the most influential. It's going to be hardest to be there because there's a lot of opposition. They're going to get really in trouble if they cross Caesar, if they cross the government. But at the same time, the potential for good, the potential for mission outreach, the potential for changing the world is so much there. So I better write these guys a letter, make sure that they got their stuff together. And Paul writes the letter to the Romans, which is a very long letter meant to explain in the greatest detail possible how the gospel works, how the story of Christianity, the story of the Old Testament in Genesis, Adam, all the way through the prophets and all the way through the prophecies, through Moses, through the sacrificial system, through the intertestamental period, all the way to where Jesus is alive, and the birth of the church and all the miracles. Like he's spending his time to give an orderly understanding of how the theology of Christianity works, and he writes it to this Roman church. It is an incredibly potent book. You could spend your whole life studying Romans and never fully pull it all out, because there are words in there that are so deeply meaningful, and we're going to cover a couple of them that can take a lifetime of study. Just that one word, okay? Yeah, Chove, I mean, I love context. It's always fun to learn that, especially because so many times, and I think one of the errors that people make when it comes to the Bible is that it is a Western document, that it was written for the Western people, Western church, or that it's a modern document, or that it was just kind of floated down from heaven 2,000 years ago and went thunk and here's your Bible, and that it really doesn't connect with reality. It doesn't connect with people, but it does. Knowing who wrote it, who he wrote it to, what the circumstances are, where the words came from, why those words are important, how it opens up so much more about the scriptures and allows us to understand God and his people far better. Like, context is so important. So Romans chapter 3, we're getting through Romans chapter 3. So if you go to the I don't know how far do you start the context, right? So in Romans chapter 1, let's go all the way to the top. So why not? Romans chapter 1, Paul starts writing and he's like, I'm so glad I've heard about you guys. You're the best. I really wish I could come be with you guys. I can't yet, but I'm really excited. Here's how the gospel's going to work. And you got to understand the importance of the key parts of Jesus' story and how salvation works and where God comes from. Because remember, in Rome, they're looking around and they're seeing like they've got gods. They got gods for days. They got temples all over the place. They got like tons. So how does the Christian God work? You know what I mean? And so they go here and he's like, okay, so let's start the conversation. And where are we going to start? The place to start the conversation about salvation, about Christianity, about Jesus, about all the wonderful things that happen, about all the amazing parts. This conversation must start with sin. Okay? This is part of the thing that right now in churches they're having a really hard time with, because nobody likes talking about sin. Nobody likes hearing about their sin. Nobody likes being convicted. Guilt and shame. People aren't very happy with that. You know, it's the idea of telling people that they don't deserve to go to heaven. They are bad people. Their decisions are wrong. Their perspectives are wrong. Their outlook is wrong. And the guilt and shame that they feel is a good thing, because it tells them that they're doing something bad and they need to do something different. Saying that is hard. It's unpopular, which is why a lot of new churches especially newly planted churches, are pushing away from the idea of preaching about sin and teaching about sin, teaching about the negative aspects of a person that need to be fixed. So next they emphasize like Jesus loves you. He has a wonderful plan for your life. He'll help you. He'll provide for you. All the benefits. But you have to start the conversation with the wrath of God against sin, why you're in trouble, what you need saving from. So Romans chapter 1, we've already covered Romans chapter 1, so I don't need to do it again. But really it's talking about how God really hates unrighteousness and sin, how terrible it is, how bad sin is, how dangerous it is, how corrupt the world has become as a result of sin. And we talked, remember I talked about the falling down the stairs of Romans 1, and boom, 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 you get to the end where it's just awful. And people in Rome look around and they're like, yeah, that explains where I am. It's not just people are bad or people, do bad things. It's our entire society, when I look around, is just steeped in selfishness and self-centeredness and hypersexuality and idol worship and really horrible stuff. And they're telling us that that's how we're supposed to be worshiping gods, and that's how we're supposed to be living. And we think we know different because we've heard of Jesus, right? So that's the beginning. Then we move into God's righteous judgment, which essentially is talking about how God is going to judge people based on their works, on the sins that they commit, on what gets them in trouble. And there will be everybody on earth is going to have to face God at some point, right? Then we get to, okay, how do you know what's wrong? How do you know what's good? How do you know what's bad? Where'd that come from? And Paul goes, well, it was written down. The moral law of how God's going to judge this entire world was written down in the Jewish scriptures. He gave us the 10 commandments. He gave us how Jews are supposed to live according to be a different people. He gave us the moral law throughout not only Deuteronomy, but throughout the story of Israel, talking about universal things. And therefore, as you stand convicted, as you read it, you're going to feel convicted because you don't line up to it. You're going to feel convicted because it's what God wants you to do. Well, everybody reading it goes, okay, I have lusted, I have sinned, I have broken God's law, I have used his name in vain, I have, disobeyed my parents, I've coveted, like just the 10 Commandments alone, I've broken 3/4 of them, right? And therefore, yeah, I'm in trouble. So you get to that point where Paul goes, listen, society's a mess, God hates sin. Well, what about me? Okay, I'm not society. Okay, God judges and is going to judge you on your life. How? Well, according to his law. Oh, okay, what's his law? Well, it was written to the Jews, and it was written by Moses, and it was written by God, and it was given to you. So take a look at that, and you go to it, and you read it, and you're like, I not only does my conscience tell me I'm wrong, but I look into this thing, and clearly I got a problem, right? Whether you're a Jew, and you are someone who has read the law, and you grew up with it, and you realize, man, I do not line up with that. Or you're a Gentile, and you're like, I'm even worse. Like, I've been literally worshiping false gods and demons for my whole life. This is the problem. Well, what happens now? Right? Well, the argument then is, well, maybe I should become Jewish. Should I become Jewish? Like, maybe the idea is I need to go to the temple. I need to go enter into the sacrificial system. I need to get circumcised. I need to become a proselyte of the Jews. Isn't that how we're supposed to be doing things? Maybe if they're right and we're supposed to be reading the Old Testament, I should become Jewish. And Paul's argument is no, that's not what we're doing anymore. That's not how God is operating anymore. In fact, the Jews are as bad off or worse than you because they knew the Messiah. They rejected the Messiah. And Romans 3 is where the argument starts to turn. Right? Romans 3 is where the hope starts to enter in. You start to feel really, really miserable at this point, right? Society sucks and the world sucks and sin is everywhere, and guilt and shame and misery. And I get it, Paul, and I get it, God. I am a sinner. I'm broken. I'm lost, and I don't know how to save myself. Religion's not doing it. My giving's not doing it. I don't know how to save myself from the wrath of God that is to come. And then it keeps going. Romans chapter 3, verse 9. So the question is then, then what about all the good people, right? What about the Pharisees, the people that have been obeying God's law? What about the people who are good guys? Just they're good people. They're not bad. We like them. We think they're good. What about them? What about the people who have been obedient to the religion that they know? What about people who are generous and kind and whatever, that are just great people? And then we get into Romans chapter 3 where he lays down, listen, no, it doesn't work that way. What then, are Jews any better off? No, not at all. For we have already charged that all, both Jews and Greeks, are under sin. As it's written, no one is righteous, no, not one. No one understands, no one seeks God. All have turned aside. Together they have become worthless. No one does good, not even one. Their throat is an open grave. They use their tongues to deceive. Venom of asps is under their lips. Their mouth is full of curses and bitterness. Their feet are swift to shed blood. And paths are ruin and misery. And the way of peace they have not known. There is no fear of God before their eyes. And so that's not a Jew telling the Gentiles. That is the apostle going, this is the human condition. Everybody. The people who think they're doing good aren't. The people who open their mouth and think that they're telling the truth aren't. When they speak, we know this, everybody seems to have this predilection towards hurting people with their words. Right? There's a wrath and an anger inside of people. There's a desire to suppress those people we hate and to hurt them. That we don't know how to find to be right with God. We don't know how to be right with each other. We've proven it. Every time we try, we wreck it. Right? Why? Because there's no fear of God before our eyes. Now it says, we know that whatever the law says, it speaks to those who are under the law, so that every mouth may be stopped and the whole world may be held accountable to God. For by works of the law, no human being will be justified in his sight, since through the law comes knowledge of sin. So the question is, what if I start obeying the law? What if I just start right here, start now and be like, what if I just do everything right from this point on? And Paul goes, no, it doesn't work that way. You can't You can't obey your way out of all the sin you've committed, right? You can't earn your way. You can't perfect your way. You can't all of a sudden become the best person in the world and just pretend that other sin didn't happen. The reason that we have the law, the reason we have the whole Old Testament, the reason we have all these stories is so that you can see without question, without a doubt, there is no way to be saved. You go to Adam and Eve, like, yeah, everybody's cursed. Everybody's got sin. You go through Abraham. Abraham's like chosen by God. He blows it a whole bunch of times. You go to Noah, or before that, I guess, you got Noah, and it's like the whole world is sinful. Well, what if we just wipe out all the bad people? Keep only the good ones. We'll keep the 6 good ones on earth. We'll just wipe everybody out. Within no time, sin's back, and it's a problem. You keep moving. Moses. Okay, what if there's miracles? Plagues and miracles and salvation and massive works of God to be able to show everybody, no, without question, this is God, and He will save, and He delivers people from the worst slave owners and the worst people ever, and His people march out in victory, even taking the spoils of war with them. And within 5 minutes, they're complaining. They're complaining that they don't like where they are, and they think they should go back to Egypt to be slaves again. God gives them the law and says, listen, you're my people. I love you, and I want to be with you, and this is how I want you to live. I'm calling you out. Live this way. Can any of them? No. Did Moses? No. Moses didn't even make it to the promised land. He blew it. He was a sinner too. Everybody fell short. Nobody made it. Why? Because the whole purpose of that story was to show that no one can save themselves, and to teach us and to show us, no matter what we do, we still are in sin, and we can't be saved by anything we're going to do. Now we get the turn of the corner. The righteousness of God through faith. But now, the righteousness of God has been manifested apart from the law, although the law and the prophets bear witness to it. What does that mean? The righteousness of God, as personified in Jesus, right, has been manifested apart from the laws. And something came in perfect righteousness. The law was good. Then the lawgiver, Jesus, one who is God, came, and all the prophecies and all the things pointing to Jesus came about in Him. He is the righteousness of God. He has become perfect. He lived a perfect life according to exactly what God wanted. Perfect morals, perfect obedience, perfect words, perfect. Nothing He did was ever wrong. And then it keeps going in verse 22. The righteousness of God through faith in Jesus Christ for all who believe. Okay? So how do you get saved? Well, if you can't save yourself, and you can't obey your way out of it, what do you have to do? How do I get righteousness? Well, somebody else has to live that perfect life and offer you their righteousness. See, that's what it says here. The righteousness of God through faith in Jesus Christ for all who believe. You have to believe that Jesus was perfect. For there is no distinction, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. That's what we've been talking about, right? And are justified, as in justified means that you're no longer a lawbreaker. According to the law, you were innocent, as Jesus is innocent. Now, if you believe in Him, you become innocent by His grace. Here we're gonna highlight that so you guys can see it, right? We got a whole bunch of stuff to go through here. Boop. Justified, as in they are made legal. They are no longer under the law, as broken the law. They are now innocent by His grace, as in there's nothing that anybody has to do to earn it. There's nothing you can do to buy it. There's nothing you can do to manipulate God into giving it to you. It is a gift through the redemption that is in Christ Jesus. Redemption is an Old Testament word which points to the Old Testament sacrificial system, as in you were a slave. If you were a slave, or if you were stuck in sin, or if you were someone who was headed for Sheol, or headed for death, headed for the bad place, shall we say, you could be redeemed from it. You can be saved from it. You can be bought back from the enemy, bought back from a slave owner, bought back from sin, bought back from the consequence through either a sacrifice or through giving of your, whatever the law said. So Jesus was the redemption. Jesus was the sacrifice. Jesus was your payment. He paid so you were no longer in slavery. He paid so that God, whatever you owed God, he paid for it. That's redemption. He paid for it so that you wouldn't have to. You were no longer under as a slave. You were no longer stuck in that position, that situation. Jesus paid for you with his blood, whom God put forwards as a propitiation. The word propitiation means to appease God's wrath. Okay, so God, we just did a whole bunch of scriptures all here about how God hates sin. God is wrathful against sin. God just absolutely despises sin and sinners, because it, not only because it is, bad, but because it's destructive. It pulls people from him. It ruins his creation. It ruins relationships. It breaks love. It causes people to be under a curse. It's bad, and he hates it because he wants good for his people, good for his creation. Therefore, his wrath against sinners, his wrath against that sin, because he's a good, righteous judge who should be angry at sin, who should be angry at bad things. Where did he pour out all that wrath? He poured it out on Jesus. He shed Jesus' blood for our sake. Now, we'll pause there for a second. Why wrath? We don't like wrath. We don't like the idea of being angry. But just stop for a minute and ask yourself if seeing wrong makes you angry. If you see something that you believe is morally wrong happening to somebody who doesn't deserve it, right? Somebody that you care about, or happening to you, does it make you angry? Of course it does. Of course it does. You look out at the world, and you look out at whether it be, Russia and Ukraine, or you look at somebody who kicks a homeless person, or you look at somebody who hurts your child, or you look at somebody who owed you something and didn't give it to you. You get angry because in your heart, because you're a creature of God, you know that when you see sin, when you see injustice, anger comes up. What do you do with that anger? God feels the same way. God poured that wrath out. Instead of pouring it on sinners, he poured it out on Jesus. And it says, to be received by faith. In other words, do you believe that Jesus justified you? He obeyed the law and made you innocent under the law, if you believe it, that it was offered freely to you, grace is a gift, that he is your redeemer, that you were under slavery, you were headed for the wrong place, you were headed for the bad place, you were under slavery to sin and you couldn't stop, and that Jesus redeemed you, he bought you back with his blood? Do you believe that God was the one who put Jesus forward, who offered him in your place, that he took the wrath you deserved? He was the propitiation, taking the wrath you deserved by his blood shed on the cross. Do you believe that? If you believe that, then you are offered salvation. This was to show God's righteousness, because in his divine forbearance, he had passed over former sins. What that means is that he could have wiped us out at any time, right? Nobody is righteous. Nobody deserves life. Nobody deserves heaven. Nobody deserves anything good. We are all under wrath, creatures under wrath. And God, in his divine forbearance, he looked upon all this horrible stuff that caused him to be absolutely wrathful against it. And he waited so that he could wait and pass over, and he could get to the place where people can be saved, because he wants people saved. He waited. It was to show his righteousness at the present time, so that he might be just and the justifier of one who has faith in Jesus. He waited patiently for the time for Jesus to come and finish it all off, to be the final sacrifice in the Jewish sacrificial system, so that people could be saved. He didn't have to. He chose to. That's salvation. Like, I'd love to keep going. We could go all the way through Romans, and it would never stop, because it's this freight train of good news, and this freight train of reality checks, and this freight train of seeing God for who he really is. Not this big Santa Claus, not this scary man in the sky, one who is who does hate sin and is wrathful, but offers his son who is divinely right, is because he's God and creator, to punish, and chooses not to, but instead punishes his son. Like, we could just keep going and learning more and more about God. But I want to pause there just to simply say, go read Romans. We can talk about it more, but dang, it is a heck of a book, and it shows God's amazing grace. So what does that mean? Well, if I were to just kind of take a minute to try to draw an application, it's that you are loved. You're a sinner, okay? You broke God's law. You've broken your conscience. You're currently in sin. You are currently hurting people. You're currently hurting yourself. Right now, you are a sinner. And I'm talking to Christians too. You are. Your heart is bent away from God, and you keep sinning. The enemy looks at you, the devil, the enemy, the one who wants to curse you. Like I believe in the devil, in Satan, and he wants you to feel guilt and shame and fear that drives you away from God. Right? He wants you to go, I'm a horrible person. For a Christian, I'm a horrible person. I'm a terrible person. I don't deserve anything. God hates me. God doesn't like me anymore. I'm such a hypocrite. I'm going to go crawl into a hole and not talk to God anymore. Right? That's what he wants from you. But that's not how God operates. God has divine forbearance for you and traded his son for you. He knew the sin you would commit, and he continues to accept you and to love you because he sees that sin is paid for. The wrath is gone. He doesn't have wrath against you. All that you've done, he's already poured that wrath out on Jesus. All the punishment that you think you deserve, he's already punished Jesus. All the ways you think you've broken the law and you deserve to be, bad things to happen to you, he's already done the bad thing to Jesus. You are saved. He's your father. He loves you, and he sees you as his. Okay? You're not under wrath. He loves you. Now, if you're not a believer, if you're not a Christian, you too, you felt conviction. You felt guilt, you felt shame, and you have done everything you can to hide from it, to run from it, to medicate it away, to argue it away, to blame other people for it, to everything you can to not have to think about the shame, the guilt, the fear that you have. You've seen the world, you've looked around, and you realize there is someone bigger than you. You've felt the understanding that there is a God, and you realize that in your heart, your conscience, you are a sinner. Salvation is offered to you too. No one is righteous. Nobody at the church is righteous. There's no pastor that's more righteous than you. There's no preacher that's more righteous than you. Nobody starts with points. We all start as objects of wrath. What do we know that's different? Well, the difference between a Christian and a non-Christian is Christians sin, but we hate it and we want to change it, and we keep coming to Jesus, and Jesus keeps forgiving us. A non-believer sins and makes excuses for it and runs from the one who's trying to save them, runs from the God who wants to help them because they don't want to feel that conviction anymore. A Christian is just one who's turned to Jesus and says, I'm a sinner, help me. You can do that too. It's free. It's offered for free. It's grace as a gift. What do you have to do? Well, nothing. There's no obedience you must do. There is no magic formula you must do. There's no thing you must do to earn this grace. Are there consequences? Of course. If you believe in Jesus and he's the one who saved you, that should create worship in you. That should cause you to want to thank him. That should cause you to want to learn more about him. That should cause you to want to put away the things that have caused wrath to fall on him, that caused hatred to be given to him, cause him to go to the cross. You'd be like, I don't want to do that anymore, because God hates it and it hurt. That's why Jesus died. So I don't want to do that. There's consequences, right? You go, okay, well now I need to learn more, which means I need to go be with his people. I need to go submit myself to somebody who knows more than me. I need to go find my way to who's going to teach me how to understand God better. There's consequences, but there's nothing you must do. You don't have to clean yourself up before you go to God. You don't have to become a certain level of good before you go to God. You don't have to go find some kind of magic, religious formula before you go to God. You just right now, in this place, right now, you say, I'm a sinner. I need help. Please forgive me. And the only reason I can say that is because Jesus died in my place. He took the wrath I deserve. Teach me what that's like. Introduce me to people who are going to explain that to me. Help me ask good questions. It's free. It's offered to you. But it was paid for by the perfect Son of God, dying in the worst way possible, having the wrath of God poured out on him. It's an amazing thing. And that's the gospel. We must not get this confused, and we must not lose sight of this, and we can't bury it under the pile of Western culture or our church or whatever, our own stuff. This is the gospel. This is what it's about. This is what we're built on. This is the message we share. Have I forgotten resurrection? Yes, we got to believe in the resurrection. Jesus conquered death, obviously. That's just not part of this verse. Okay, but we can talk about that another time. But yeah, please understand, and please take it seriously. Partially popped? You mean like super crunchy popcorn? That sounds terrible. I don't want to criticize Quiz, but don't we usually take the half pop kernels and push those aside to eat the good ones?